Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Alejandra Brady. Did I pronounce that, Alejandra? Okay. Was
You
that
did.
all
Yes,
right?
you did. Yes, you did.
We didn't do a lot of Spanish at my school, but we did do a bit of conversational Spanish. But yeah, that's as far as it goes. And that's like, how many years ago is that? 40 years ago. So
Well, we're the same age, so yes,
yeah.
it's been a minute, right?
It's spooky, right?
Yeah.
There's so many people. I mentioned this yesterday. So many people around our age,
Yeah.
and so many listeners are 40 plus, right? So 40 to 60 is that plus bit. And I was talking to after we spoke yesterday. I talked to a social worker, adoption director, and an adoption agency, and I was asking her about, because obviously she deals with kids and adopting.
Right.
So I asked her this question. So have you heard this phrase coming out of the fog?
Coming out of the what? Fog?
Coming out of
Coming
the
out of the
fog,
fog?
yeah. That's why I asked the adoption director, right? And she had not heard that word. So
Interesting.
do you know, like, we think everybody is aware of this sort of stuff that's going on in the adoptee space, but no, a
So
phrase.
interesting. Yeah.
And that's a big thing. So for you listeners, if you're looking to do any advocacy or reach of that stuff, like, don't assume stuff like I did. I'm just assuming she knows that before, but chances are that there's stuff going on for the kids that they weren't aware of.
Right.
They couldn't put words to. Like
Right.
you said that you weren't aware of what was going on for you until you started writing your book,
Right.
like,
Right.
7 years ago, right? So
It happened. Yeah. 7 years
yeah,
ago. Yeah. It just, you know, I was raised, I will not speak in general terms here. I was raised, to feel very grateful, as we chatted about earlier, for being adopted. And I am. I don't discount that at all. But because of that, there was never any questions or ever any conversations about whether or not I felt anything else other than the gratitude.
yeah,
Right. And what I've learned is that regardless of how good a situation you may have had as an adopted child, there's still those underlying feelings, right, of rejection, of abandonment. I learned a lot of pieces of my story once my biological mother found me. Like, I was left, she was told that my adoptive parents picked me up at 3 days. And I was told by my parents, who of course I believe in both, actually, in this case, that I was picked up at 5 weeks. So from 3 days to 5 weeks, my whereabouts are unknown.
yeah,
And from what I've been able to gather from working with healers and piecing it together by listening to different sides of the story, I was just left in a crib in an orphanage style setting at the agency, the adoption home, and basically just got a bottle stuck in my mouth and my diapers changed, and nobody picked me up, nobody held me, nobody did anything. And of course, for those of us that have had children, myself included, that's the formative time when you bond with another human being. And so, yeah, I didn't understand why I felt some of the things that I felt when I was only supposed to feel grateful,
yeah.
you know?
And there's that huge difference between kind of spontaneous gratitude that comes from within us and forced gratitude or suggested gratitude, or a command to be grateful, is a lot different to gratitude that bubbles up from within inside us. And I was swapping texts with Jude, who's done this guest co-hosting with me recently, Jude Hung, and I said, "Does this kind of forced gratitude, does that somehow can that make spontaneous internal gratitude for us harder, right? So if we've been told that we should be grateful and we haven't felt grateful, does that kind of dispose us against gratitude in the future? Does that You making it? Does
It
that make
makes
any
sense.
sense?
It does make sense. I think both things can exist at the same time. You know, there is an underlying gratitude for me for the woman who gave birth to me and gave me up for adoption in hopes that I have a better life, right? Yes, her parents were forcing her to do it. Yes, the boy's family was also forcing it to happen, right? So she was in that situation too. But at the same time, not being able to explore any other feelings was interesting too. So I think both can be right. Both can exist
Yeah,
next to each other
yeah.
in some respect, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. A few people have been telling me this over the last few months that I'm a bit too reductionist, right? I'm a bit too left brain, this or this,
Mhm.
when this and this can exist.
I think
So
it can be
thank
an
you for giving
and.
me that same lesson again. Maybe it'll land this time, right? Maybe this will land for me
It
better.
takes a few minutes for us to get some stuff through our heads, doesn't it? I know it takes me several times on certain things. I'm like, okay, I finally am going to listen. You know, you can stop beating it into me.
Yeah. So the big question, like that we like to
Mhm.
start with these days, this question. So does the word healing, does that word resonate with you, or to what
Absolutely.
extent does that, yeah, that resonates with you?
Absolutely, 100%. I think that what I embarked upon at the age of 50 when I started writing the book and when I started going down into my spiritual awakening was a journey of healing. It was a journey of healing for that, you know, inner child that I didn't even know I needed. Because again, my life has been great. I had two wonderful parents who adopted me. They've both since passed. 2 years later, my biological mother and her family found me. 10 years to the same week, my biological father's family found me. And even though that's been quite the journey on its own, and I would certainly love a point to address that on this podcast at some point when it feels organic to do so, is to just kind of tell people, you know, be careful when you go into these relationships. But they've turned out to be some of my biggest teachers. And I think I needed to meet them and be a part of their family to a certain extent for however long that was in order to complete the healing of that inner child that felt, you know, subconsciously to me, uh, abandoned and rejected. You know, when the first healer that I ever worked with was at Miraval in Tucson, as far as this goes. And she said, you know, you have very deep-seated feelings of abandonment and rejection. I go, no, I don't. Why in the world would I have that? You know, and she goes, this is deep. This is a mother wound. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, whoa, okay. And that I needed to, you know, forgive my mother, meaning biological, for giving me up. And, you know, and I'm like, oh no, but she did the best for me. This is what I was, you know, the pattern, right? The repetition and the pattern and what we were, I don't want to say brainwashed because I don't think my parents meant it that way, but what I was taught to think and feel, oh no, she did the best thing she could for me. She gave me up for adoption because she was 17, you know, the story. And she goes, yeah, the story doesn't matter. It doesn't change how you feel about being 9 months in somebody's body who didn't want you to be there, first of all, right? Because she's dealing with shame and guilt and anger and everything else too, and abandonment herself by her family and her boyfriend. And I'm absorbing all of that while I'm in utero. And then I'm born into a world where she doesn't want me, the father's family doesn't want me, and I'm laying there for 5 weeks till somebody comes and gets me, like, you know. So it has been a journey of healing and of feeling worthy without understanding why I needed to feel that, if that, you know.
Yeah. So we kind of, sounds to me like you're pulling apart the deep emotional stuff, the mother wound, as your healer referred to it, to the narrative. You're separating the two things out. One is an embodied thing, and one is a belief thing. It's a head thing. You're separating those two out. Is that?
For me, it all works together, I guess. I just feel like it's all one. Like I had to go through all of it to get to where I am now. And having them show up in my life, you know, another layer. A lot of people don't have to deal with that layer of it. Um, So to me, it all kind of was the same thing because I was going through all of it at the same time.
Okay. So what does healing mean to you in a sentence? How would you sum it up in a sentence?
Oh gosh, in one sentence. Getting to a point where I'm okay with what has happened and understanding that it doesn't define me.
So acceptance and it doesn't define me. So how do you define yourself?
I define myself as somebody who has done the work, has gotten in the muck and has done the work to get to a place where I feel a lot of peace on this topic at this point in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that they found me. I'm grateful that they were in my life for the period of time that I deemed them necessary to be there. And I'm grateful for the fact that I was also strong enough to say, this isn't working for me anymore. And I wish you all love and peace, but I no longer wish to have a relationship with you.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know that I would have had the strength to say that had I not gone through the healing that I did, you know, because you would have felt like, oh my God, this is my family. But, you know, for those of us that are adopted, family is the people who are changing your diapers and are feeding you and all that, not somebody that you share DNA with. At least that's how I feel.
Yeah.
You know, and I tried to make it so, but in the end, it didn't work. On the mother's side, the father's side is great. But yeah, I just kind of feel like I think I got a lot of strength in myself and in just who I am as a person to be able to also say, no, thank you. Because that's a hard one for a lot of people.
Yeah. It sounded even to me, it sounded like a weird question with the identification bit. I guess what I'm kind of getting at is my biggest, you know, the catalyst, not the catalyst, the biggest part of my healing stuff, I would say, was actually 17 years ago going on a retreat and sharing. We all shared our stories, the 8 of us, and these weren't adoptees. They were just, you know, 2 people running the retreat, 6 people including me on it. We shared our stories, and then we kind of disidentified from them, right? So we put some space between what had happened to us and who we were. We disidentified from the
Interesting.
story, and disidentifying from the story is also, I guess, realizing that a lot of our beliefs were incorrect, right? And also kind of realizing that the inner voice in our head, so the narrator, the unreliable narrator, is unreliable. The voice in our head is a liar. The story that we're telling ourselves isn't true. And so it was a whole week of that stuff of sharing the story and then kind of disidentifying from it. And I think that was what was behind my question in terms of how you identify. How do you identify? And I was also, the other thing is, you also talked about a spiritual stuff. So I was thinking, well, does Alejandra identify as, you know, the spiritual being having the human experience?
100%. Yes, I am a spiritual being having a human experience for sure.
Yeah.
And apparently I chose to come back at this time in this body, in this situation, you know, for a purpose. So hopefully I'm fulfilling that now by sharing my story and by talking to others about the adoption story that is mine.
So what does it mean to you, or does it mean to you, or what does it mean in? Because I use that quote all the time. I can never never remember how to pronounce the guy's name who said that. But sometimes when I say that to people who are not into that sort of stuff, they look at me really blankly.
Sure.
So how would you explain that to somebody that isn't already on that sort of spirit?
Honestly, I don't even know that you can, in all honesty. I have so many friends who are not into all of this and into the spirituality. And anytime I broach any kind of conversation on spirituality, that blank look comes over their face, or they immediately get defensive and say, I don't believe in that stuff. Like I'm going to start talking about witchcraft and perform an exorcism on them or something. So I have not had much experience in talking to people who don't want to hear it, because I feel like I get shut down very quickly.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's just being, that's just being truthful. So now I try and find people, and I do have people that come to me now. My tribe is growing as I'm seeking other like-minded individuals that I can have these conversations with. But by that point, they already feel that way, right? But the ones that don't, unless they're ready to, I haven't seen a way to get through.
Okay.
I haven't been able to talk to anybody who 100% didn't and then suddenly was open to.
Yeah.
In my experience.
Okay. So that's kind of reassuring, because it's not just me.
It's very challenging. And, you have to know their boundaries too. And I try and be I like people to be respectful of mine. So I try and be very respectful of others. So, I can feel immediately if they just don't even want to go down that path or have that kind of conversation in any way, shape, or form. And I will pivot out of respect to them, but I always tell them, if you ever want to, I'm here. Let me know and we'll dive into it. Hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So how did you use the word spiritual awakening? I think, was that the word?
Yes, I had a spiritual awakening. Yes, my spiritual awakening came at 50, and that's when my spiritual journey started, that I'm sure I will be on for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And how did it start?
Mine started, I have to pivot for a minute. I've had gifts since I was a child. I just didn't realize that nobody else had them, or that I was the only one around the people around me who had them. I just kind of thought, oh, everyone can talk to dead people. Everyone sees dead people. Everyone gets messages. It never occurred to me that I maybe was not like everybody else. So when I turned 50, out of nowhere, I had to have cervical fusion. I have a big scar right here. I have a plate with 6 screws in my neck. And in order to get ready for that cervical fusion, I was working with a client who was much more energetically inclined than I was. And she started mentioning things to me. And it's interesting because I think you can pick up if somebody is interested. So you'll throw out a breadcrumb and see if they, want more. So she started saying things to me, and she just said one day, I hired this feng shui practitioner to come to my home. And she said that if she does more than one consultation, that she won't charge travel time. Do you want a consultation since you're about to go into surgery? Maybe she can help, get your bedroom ready or whatever it is. Now, I'm already an interior designer, so my bedroom's been redone a gazillion times. But the thought of having it done energetically, since I was going to be spending a lot of time in there, I was going to be in a neck brace from here to here. So you can't read, you can't drive, you can't work, you can just look straight ahead. That's it. So I was going to be spending a lot of time in bed watching TV, basically, is what it was going to amount to. I said yes. She came to my home. Within 10 minutes, she told me, you're going to be doing this. I said, no, just tell me what I need to do to get ready for surgery. Like, I have no intention of doing this. Sure enough, I did what she said. I had my surgery. The energy in our house shifted so dramatically that I'm like, I need to be doing this. And I think that was the catalyst. Like, I suddenly wanted to do something, not just to make things look beautiful, but to make things feel beautiful. And it was the first time that I really started feeling that I could work with energy. And then that kind of led to my wanting to learn about meditation, learn about Reiki, learn about feng shui. I went back and I went to her and I asked if I could, she'd take me on as a student since she said to be doing this. And she said yes, and I got certified under her. And that's kind of what opened the door to the spiritual world for me, because I'd heard about these things, but I hadn't ever really been interested in them. And as I became more interested and as I worked with healers, and as we talked about things, they showed me what my gifts were and how I could use them to help others. And I found that incredible, and then that's what kind of led to my doing what I do now, which, I work with energy. I am an energy worker. I'm an energy healer, light worker, pick your name for me, but I do it through your home. And although I have mediumship abilities and I have oracle capabilities, I am able to receive messages from people who've passed. I don't work that way with others. I come in and I talk to your house, and your house will tell me what's going on, and whatever's going on with your house is going on with you. So I use my gifts that way.
So how do the two things sit together, the healing and the spiritual awakening? What's the relationship between those two?
It was all happening at the exact same time. I went to work with healers at Miraval, which is the first place I went that I started working with spiritual healers, truly because I thought that I was going to get these clients who wanted feng shui, who knew all about spirituality, but I didn't. And they were going to know a lot more about modalities. And I wanted to be informed when I went to talk to them. So I literally just went there to kind of do research for what I was going to be doing for work. And, then I walked into that first class and she goes, mother issues, deep-rooted resentment and abandonment issues and all that. I'm like, well, wait a second. What are we talking about here? Like, I just was going to do Reiki today, So I went for one thing and it led to the other.
Okay.
So feng shui to me is like, it was my gateway to all of this. And because I energetically aligned my house, I think that I was ready for the healing. I think you also have to be at a point where you're ready. And I was ready. And so I went with one intention, and session after session after session, especially that first time that I went, was all about the mother wound, abandonment, rejection, the fact that I had gifts, how to differentiate them, how to work with them, how to protect myself. And I was like, this was not what I thought I was coming here at all. I spent a week there and cried, I don't know how many hours every single day, which I wasn't expecting, connected with my parents who'd passed, which I wasn't expecting. All these things happened that became part of my healing. And it all happened because I went for a completely different reason, right? But I was ready, I guess. I was open, I was ready. I was ready to move on and to heal.
Yeah. So is healing about a change of energy then? Is that
I
one
think
way
so. I think it's a little bit of everything, right? I think it's a change in our energy. I think it is acknowledging what we've been through. And, I did cry for that little girl who was left there in the bassinet for 5 weeks. You have to go through the grief of it too, and the grief of being abandoned and the grief of feeling rejected. I did a lot of crying for her. I did a lot of talking to her and telling her that everything was going to work out okay. And then I think you get to the acceptance. And then I think after that, you get to, well, how can I use what I've learned to help others and pay it forward?
Yeah.
And that's sort of where I am, at this point, and it's okay to still, feel resentment or feel whatever you feel towards those people. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You just can't let that be your guide anymore.
Because one of my views on healing is that it's about being less concerned with the things like resentment.
Mm-hmm.
So I sometimes say to people that I'm more interested in who I am than how I feel. Yeah, I'm looking at, so what I mean by that is, the spiritual being having the human experience, or the human experience in with that human experience, I'm gonna put all the trauma, and I'm gonna break, and I'm defining trauma as resentment, anger, fear, insecurity, loss, grief,
Sure.
all those things. I'm fairly and squarely putting those in the human experience stuff, but I'm looking at this from I'm more interested in the essence of who I am and who we are, that spiritual being stuff. So I'm more interested in who I am than how I feel. But that's quite a left brainy kind of hard blokey sort of things to say to somebody that's like a light worker.
Well, I think that's just it. You have to have the human part of the story to be able to connect with others. If you are just always light and love and la 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 la, it's very hard to connect. I think in order to use the spiritual gifts that I have, it's of the essence that I went through some of those human experiences, because that is how I relate to somebody else. And then I can show them the spiritual side of things, or why it was for their benefit, or how to move past the trauma, whether it's big T, little t, whatever it may be in your situation, how to move past it. Because otherwise, if you're just always, and I have worked with healers who are so floating above the clouds 24/7 that they can't relate to anything, and I find I don't relate to them. I'm like, no, you have to understand, like, this hurt, and if they can't see that, if it's just about the I am all the time, it's very hard to relate to another soul.
Yeah.
For me, this is all for me, how I work.
That's making a lot of sense to me, and I can see some of my errors in that regard. You're talking about I think you're talking a lot about parenting your own inner child.
I had to, but I didn't even know that I had to, but that's what came out of, 3 years in. I started this at 50. At 53, I was still working with healers on a regular basis, and I thought I'd kind of cleared all the mother stuff, and 6 months later I'll walk in somewhere and they're like, we need to talk about your mother wound. I'm like, oh my God, when is this going to be done? Because the human side of us is like, okay, I did the work, I'm done. Like, can we move on? But there's so many layers to some of this stuff that goes so deep for us who have been adopted, whether it's a good situation or bad situation. You just have to keep excavating and parenting that, inner child so that they feel safe, because when they feel safe, then you can take deeper breaths, I feel.
So you talked about the healing for the rest of our lives, or rest of your life. I'm with that, but you're also referring to the I am, and the I am bit is the kind of, is that the unwoundable bit? Is that the bit that is untouched by our trauma? How do you?
I think that's more our soul, right? That's like who we are. I am somebody who does believe that we can come back, so I think that's that person, that soul, that being, that light being that's inside of us, right? The spirit who's having the experience. But that doesn't mean that we're not having the experience. We're still having the experience.
The experience is the experience.
Right. And we need to be able to work with both, I feel.
There's a million places to go from there.
I know.
So do any particular healing moments come to mind, Alejandra?
The very first one that I talked about, that I touched on, when I literally got put into a fetal position with that healer at Miraval, and just cried and cried and cried. And mind you, I thought I was walking into a Reiki session. Like, this is not where I thought this was going to go. But that was the very first time that I realized that these things were going on deep down inside me that I didn't even realize, and how they were affecting, just how I looked at the world. It was just such a huge deal to me if I wasn't included in something with a group
Yeah.
of friends, like, that it was so touchy, that feeling of, oh, you weren't included, oh, we didn't pick you. Growing up was just such a trigger. And now I could care less, if somebody calls me, if they don't call me, which it turned out to be the opposite. I have more people around me now, but just understanding why some of those feelings that I hadn't had the terminology
Yeah.
to put to them, it really helped. It really, really helped a lot. So I think that one was the most significant. And then I spent a year when we lived in Sedona working with an amazing healer there, that we did a lot of inner child work too, and just how to move through it and past it, right? Because you got to go through it. You can't just jump over it. And then what else has been a really good, my meditation. I have a daily meditation practice. I get up every morning and I meditate before I either get out of bed or I run to my meditation room and do it there. All the dogs come in and jump all over me while I'm doing it, and everybody conks out and lays out. It's really cute. I think that finding stillness every day also helps me tremendously. And honestly, having met them and having them be a part of my life for the time that they were a part of my life, I think really helped towards the healing.
So, I mean, we talked before I dived in. We talked about coming out of the fog and that conversation that I'd had with an adoption agency social worker yesterday. There's a sense for me that we're going to be coming out of we're going to be coming out of the fog forever. It's becoming conscious of the subconscious, and then becoming conscious of more of the subconscious, and then it's a repetitive, ongoing system, ongoing process of surfacing the stuff
Right.
that we haven't seen before.
Right. And there may be something that triggers you 5 years from now that, you hadn't come across yet. So I do think that it'll be a lifelong process, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. That's part of my journey. So
Yeah.
it is. Because just when you think you're okay with things is when something happens and you're like, where did that reaction come from? And it comes from something that will stem back to that, the adoption.
Yeah.
That you probably already thought you were totally fine with, kind of like when I went in 3 years later and I'm like, we're still talking about this. Am I not done yet?
Yeah. But was there a moment where the impatience dropped away for this?
Was there a moment where
Was there a moment when you're saying like I was aren't we done with this yet? And I'm asking, was there a moment when the impatience dropped away?
probably now I'm much less impatient now. I think at the beginning, I am a type A, I am a Virgo, I'm an oldest child. So I am used to like, let's just get it done, let's get it done. Okay, this is broken, let's fix it, move on. So when I thought I've done the work, I've put in my time, it should be all fixed. And then at that 3-year mark when it wasn't, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? And then I understood this is never going to be fixed, right? We're just going to get to a better place for me to be able to deal with it, and a better maybe perspective for me to see the entire situation in. But now I understand, yeah, I'm not done. I'll never be done,
Yeah.
and that's okay. Now I'm fine with it. But at the beginning, I just wanted, same as I was getting all my spiritual gifts and understanding them, I needed validation. If somebody said, oh, you're very clairaudient, I'm like, okay, so tonight I need to hear a voice in my head tell me something so that I believe what I'm being told. I'm just that person. So I just wanted it to check it off my to-do. My husband says, you and your to-do list. Like I wanted to check it off my to-do list. Okay, done with this healing, done with this, done with the mother wound, done, check, and yes, now I understand that it probably never will be. And that's okay. I'm just at a different place with it.
So you mentioned one of my favorite words, right? Which is perspective. So how do you see perspectives and healing? How do you see the relationship between those two?
I think when you've done the work, then you have a better perspective on the entire situation. And what has helped me a lot, and writing the book was a huge part of my healing journey, because I was forced to go back and relive things. And I remember my editor telling me, when I wrote something, a particular experience that happened with the biological family, she said to me, you sound very hard here. You sound like you're making them the villains and you the victim. And I think you need to see it from a different perspective. And I remember thinking, well, I was really mad. They did something that really hurt me. I was the victim, and she goes, nope, I don't think that's the story you're trying to get across based on the rest of the book. Go back and look at it from a different perspective. And that stuck with me. And I went back and I almost rewrote almost the majority of the book from a different perspective for that reason, understanding that everybody was on their own journey and everybody was doing what they felt was best 90% of the time, right? There's a few things that they know they did incorrectly, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, everybody's doing their best all the time. And when I'm able to now back away and look at things from more than just my perspective and see, well, what was she feeling that led to this? What was she feeling that led to this? From other perspectives, then I get a much better understanding, which then leads to empathy, which then leads, I think, to further my own healing. Because nobody was doing anything. I love that quote, and I don't remember who said it either, but things are not happening to you, they're happening for you. And I strongly believe that now. I used to believe everything was happening to me. I'm the victim, I'm the victim, I'm the victim. And I don't feel that way at all anymore. I feel it's happening for me. Whatever it is happening for me for a reason, whether it's for myself or for me to help someone else or for me to be able to share the story, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But you have to see other people's perspectives too, right? I mean, I don't think there's a lot of parents who just gave up their children for absolutely no reason. There was a reason why they felt that that was their only choice. And I don't think that probably doesn't get talked about a lot, right? So.
And have you read the Anne Fessler book?
I have not.
Yeah. So the ones who went away, or the mothers who went away. That I read it ages and ages ago, and it's basically it's empathy for birth mothers, right? So she's an adoptee who interviewed birth mothers. Mm-hmm. That's as far as I can remember, and that's what other people tell me, right? So reading that book, we don't shift our own perspective. Perspective is shifted for us. It's like we can't make perspective shifts happen. They happen when we see the world differently, and we see the world differently when we read something new and we think, right, I've got a different perspective has landed for me on the basis of some information that I have read, that it's given me a new way of seeing things. So shifts in perspectives, to me, seem to be a really big part of healing. It's when...
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you need that, because otherwise you're staying in a very myopic view, right? It's just you. But there's more than just you involved.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And meeting her, hearing her version of the story helped shift my perspective too and understand it.
Yeah.
Something
that I listened, I'm interviewing a therapist called Corey Skolnick next month for the podcast. So she's a therapist. She's not an adoptee, but she's done a lot for adoptee advocacy and birth mother advocacy in those areas. And she's written she's written a book, she's written a novel, and it's set around the time that we were born, right? So the adoptive, the son is born a year after us, so that he's born in 60 rather than 67. And it's got a completely different take. It's got a completely different, well, it gave me a huge insight into the adoptive mother's mother, right? So the adoptive mother's mother was very religious and very anti-adoption. And the reading this adoptive mother's words, to me it sounded like something from the Middle Ages, not something that was going on. So at this point in the story, I think
late 60s,
the baby is the adopted boy is walking, so and talking. So he's 1 or 2, right? He's probably 2. So she's repeating, and I was just thinking about that, and because we think about adoptive mothers, we think of birth mothers, but the clarity that she brought in this to this birth, adoptive mother's mother, and I'm thinking, well, that's an adoptive mother's mother. What on earth is the birth mother's mother like? And we're talking about people that were raised in maybe during the Second World War. So there's that threat of, in the UK, Hitler invading or taking over the world. There's the rationing and all that scarcity stuff and all that fear going on. So yeah, that was a real eye-opener for me to think about adoptive mother's mother and birth mother's mother and stuff going on in that.
So I talked to my birth mother a lot about her mother and her parents because, she felt trapped, right? So it's not the way it is now. That's the other thing that we have to remember too. Now you see pregnant girls going to high school and going to school, and it's a much more accepted situation. But teenagers that got pregnant out of wedlock in the time frame that you and I were born in, it was not okay, right? So her parents forced her to go away for 9 months to adopt a home for unwed mothers, Catholic, by nuns, who, of course, can you imagine? The nuns were already a certain way, and then they're dealing with a whole bunch of women that they feel are whores. Let's call it what it is, right? And then her parents lied. So the birth mother's mother and father lied to everybody and said that their daughter was away visiting an aunt in California. So everything was about lies and deception and shame, and you're a whore and you're this and you're that. So, that helped me understand a lot too, because I've raised a child. Our son's 29, he's about to be 30. I know what a 17-year-old is like. That's a lot for a 17-year-old. And granted, people are going to say you put yourself in that situation, whatever, people make mistakes, take that part out of it. The aftermath of your decision to have sex before you got married with your boyfriend that led to a pregnancy it's almost like the punishment didn't fit the crime. You know what I mean? Like it was very harsh for her. And that gave me a lot of perspective and empathy for her. And back to gratitude. Well, thank you for still carrying me to term and giving me a shot at a better life. Right? So you can get there. You can get there by understanding what they must have gone through too. On the other hand, my adoptive parents, my grandparents, I was very close to them. So in our situation, everyone was like, woohoo, yay, yay, yay. So I didn't have an issue on that end of things.
Yeah. Can you talk to me a little bit about the energy then? And by in particular, I'm thinking about the energy coming off, the energetic repercussions, right? So we're in utero. Whenever I get near this topic, all I can think of is the fact that all I can say is we were pickled in cortisol, right? Pickled in
100%,
that,
100%.
and that's about as far as I get. I can go, right? So that's a big piece. But since you're an energy worker, I get the opinion, I get the idea that you'll be able to put a bit more. And because you're a mother, and like me mum, Mrs. haven't got any kids, right? So you're a mother. But can you put a bit more? Can you help me and the listeners understand more about that energy stuff that's going on within our birth mothers?
Sure. Well, I mean, think about when you feel that you are in a high stress, shameful, horrible situation, whatever that is. And then, like you just said, I think that's a perfect description. We were pickled in cortisol. I mean, I had never thought about that. And as I was going through the inner child work, my healers helped me see that too. It's like I was just stewing, as a lot of us are, right? Because of course, something that was not an optimal situation led to our birth mothers having to give us up. So I doubt that there was a birth mother who gave up a child out there. Maybe there's one or two who felt the way I did when I was pregnant with my child. It was a joyous occasion. We were happy. We were nesting. We were creating a home for them. They were thrown out in the wild for the most part, a lot of them, right? So energetically, that child absorbs all of it. 100%, which is why we feel the feelings that we do, which is very, very, very normal. And again, I only learned that going through my healing and working with healers who explained that to me, because it really took me a minute. I just kept saying, no, I have no reason why to feel abandoned or feel rejected. I was told I was special, I was chosen, all the good words that go along with it. And they're like, no, I mean, you were for 9 months while your little body and soul are being formed, you were in this woman's body who had nothing but unhappiness and shame and guilt, and rejection from her family, rejection from the boyfriend and from his family. I mean, it's just, picture any negative emotion you can think of, and these poor birth mothers were going through all of it.
Yeah.
And we were cooking in that.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, I'm not surprised that then people turn to other means to cope with those feelings, because you don't understand why you're having them. But now that I understand when I'm having them, I've been able to clear that energy out of me by doing a lot of energy work. But you have to figure out a way to clear it one way or another, because otherwise it's just going to take over.
So we're back to the embodied stuff, rather than the belief stuff. Yeah, we're talking I mean, about the pre-verbal, non-verbal,
right?
Yeah, the stuff that we become acclimatized to. And I was thinking about, as you were talking, so from our perspective, pickled in cortisol, right? So our environment, we're in the womb. And then I was thinking about, so that's our environment. What environment is our birth mother in? And when you talked about being sent away for 9 months to this home, my birth mother was sent away. I don't know how long she was sent away for, but I'm thinking about her environment.
Right.
I'm thinking about her environment, and the Catholic, the whole Catholic premise is guilt anyway. So it's guilt for everybody.
Right.
It's guilt
and shame, guilt, shame, anger, resent, all of it. Yeah. And her environment affects us inside of her.
Yeah.
Just,
yeah.
No, it's been a fascinating journey so far to understand that. I'm sure as I move through life, other layers will come and other things will, be uncovered. But I just want other people who are going through this to understand that it's very validated if they feel these feelings that they can't put words to, or they don't understand why they have them, like me, you know, where the minute that I was brought into my parents' house who raised me, all the negative words were flipped into positive ones, right? But there was still that undertone and those feelings that I didn't understand why I had them. So it's okay if you feel that way.
So this and it's one of those dough moments, you know, like that happened to me. I think it was early this year, something like. Somebody pointed out, right? She said, right, okay, there's relinquishment trauma, there's trauma due to relinquishment, and there's trauma in the adoptive family, and it's two completely different things, right? So the however good,
Mm-hmm.
the situation in the adoptive home, it ain't gonna wipe out. It's not gonna overcome the previous trauma, the
Right.
trauma stuff.
Right.
And the other thing that was popping into my head was I was thinking about there's a fable, a story goes around, and I think I got this in kind of personal development and business development stuff. It was the idea that if you put a frog in a saucepan of
The
cold
water.
water, yeah,
The water.
and you
Yeah.
turn it up, then the frog dies, right?
Right.
But if you try and put the frog into the hot water, and don't try this at home, kids.
No, please don't.
You know, if you try and put it jumps straight out. So it's kind of like
We slowly cooked.
it's slowly cooked, yeah, and it's the normal. It's the norm, right? We have become habituated to the cortisol level within our birth mother's womb. There's another part of me that's saying to this, can we overcook it? And do you know what I mean? Like, so let me give you it's a strange one, right? So, but I have these strange thoughts, like maybe you do too. So we haven't got any kids, but we've now got 2 dogs, and they are our 3rd and 4th dog. Right? And the 3rd one especially cried on her first night. The 4th one, not so much, right? And I can you know, when I'm lying in bed and I can hear the dog crying, I can think that was what I was like. Right? I have no memory of that, clearly.
Right.
You know, like you were 5 weeks old. I was about that as well, right? I'd been in short-term foster care. My birth mother handed me over to a short-term foster parent, whatever, once. So she gave me away twice, right? She handed me over to her, and then she went to her house and picked me up and brought me to the adoption agency. So she had to do it twice, right? So that's kind of pretty much all I know about that 5-week period. But I can hear a dog crying on her first night away from her mum, and I can think, was I like that? And my little creative mind can overcook that, right? So it can really kind of limp it on that feeling, that idea, you know, and that can quite easily take me into a place of, you know, victimhood. You talked about your editor, you know, pointing out this stuff to you. So I'm wondering, you know, can we overcook this stuff? Can we catastrophize it? Because I can see myself doing that with this little strange example.
We probably can. However, I think, and maybe it is because I have given birth and been a mom, it takes me back to having more empathy for the birth mother, because I remember hearing my child cry in the middle of the night. And so my birth mother said she had me in the room with her for the first 3 days. I mean, can you imagine? Like, I mean, just trying to put myself in her shoes. When I'd had my son in the room with me for 3 days, like nobody in hell was going to take him away from me, and to have these nuns come in and go, okay, give the baby over. They lied to her too. Her adoptive parents are here. Now go home and pretend this never happened. And this is because she told me this story directly. This is how I know this. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I can't think of anything worse. So if I was feeling in a place of victimhood before that, which at some point I'm sure I was, understanding this and understanding how that must have felt for her made me have more empathy towards her, which led to me feeling like less of a victim, if that makes sense. And we've had 11 dogs, so I get the dog thing, and it is very hard, and our dogs are like our babies too, so if I can't even stand to hear the dog cry, imagine how it must feel to hear the baby cry and then have that baby taken away from you, not because you necessarily wanted it to, but because your parents forced it to happen and you didn't feel you had another choice. And, so that takes me out of the victim mentality and more into a place of empathy for her, which once again, everybody was just doing what they felt was the best that they could do at the time.
Yeah.
And to me, that is what's really helped me move on. I just really, truly accept that everybody did what they felt was right for everybody involved at that time.
Yeah.
And then that takes it out of like what my editor was saying, they're the villains and you're the victim. It just kind of says, here's what happened. I mean, here's what happened. Basically, that's the bottom line. Here's what happened.
Yeah. So, slight change of tack.
Sure.
Have you got any have you got any kind of notions of ideas that have kind of got in the way on your healing journey? Have there been any hurdles on that journey?
I'm sure there have been, honestly. I mean, a lot of it took place during COVID. We moved back. I was writing a book. I think the biggest hurdle probably for me was having to relive a lot of it because I was writing the book, honestly, because again, everything for me was happening at the same time. And I think that's the way it was supposed to happen for me to get the story out. I don't know that if I hadn't followed through with writing the book, that I would be where I am on my healing journey, because I wouldn't be forced to go back and revisit those things, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and try and see them from a different perspective, which then helped me move forward. I got stuck on some stuff. I got stuck on when my mom died, who I call my mom, my adoptive mom. I got very stuck there because I was really angry. She dropped dead of a heart attack when she was 66, and it took me several years to not be mad at her. And so when I had to relive all that and write about that in the book, like I would just throw the computer and walk out of the room. Like it was very, very hard for me to get past that part and be okay with her leaving me, if that makes sense. I didn't want to see at times what part I played in holding me back. And you also have to accept the parts that you play to move forward. And sometimes I just didn't want to accept. I think that was another one for me. Like I can easily say it now. I accept everybody is where they are now. I couldn't it took a minute to get to that spot. Because I did want to be mad. If it was easier to be mad at people than to say what I just said, 2 minutes ago, which is everybody did what they felt was the best. But that didn't happen overnight, I had to want to feel that way at some point and get past I'm just going to be pissed off at you for the rest of my life. Because what does that get you?
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. I've got an interesting take on this, or maybe a slight difference between the two.
Sure.
You see, I don't think we can make this. I don't think we can try. So that's it, right? I don't think we can try and have an insight. I don't think we can. No, like you did at the start. I love the way that you did that. I didn't compliment you at the time. You said let's not make this general. I'm talking about me. So I don't think that I can try and have an insight. I don't think I can try and accept that everybody was doing the best. It's almost as if the best I can do is be open, and then the insight happens, or an insight happens, or it doesn't, or I have a spontaneous. It's a bit like that spontaneous gratitude stuff that we're talking about at the top, right? So whenever we go near the gratitude thing, I know that a lot of adoptees have been told to be grateful, and they haven't felt grateful. And so if you go anywhere near that, they think, well, and that's why I always distinguish between spontaneous internal gratitude and forced gratitude, right? I don't think I can't force I can't force myself to be grateful, but I can see things differently. If I keep on trying and keep on going along the journey, then so something happened last year with my biological dad when he told me not to call him again.
Right.
And I'm thinking, I'm viewing him one way, right? And then 6 months later, 7 months later, 8 months later, I speak to a cousin and I found out that my biological father was in care himself. Right. That, and I didn't make that happen. I didn't make myself, I didn't try to think better of my biological father. When I heard the truth, or a new piece of information was revealed to me, that gave me a different take on it. So it's not about trying to have an insight. It's about insights happening when new information comes to light.
I also think you need to be ready. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think I was ready to hear any of this or to work on any of this until I was 50. Like, I don't think if that information had come to me at an earlier age, that I would have been ready to listen, ready to be open to it. And I think being open and ready to heal, because I definitely was ready to heal and to move forward with my life in a different way. And I think when we're ready for that change is when we become more open. And maybe that is what helped facilitate the healing process for me, but I think you have to be ready at whatever level that means, and whatever it means for everybody. Again, I don't think there's a right and a wrong. Like I really don't. I feel that every situation is unique. Every grouping of people is unique. And I don't know. In my case, I was ready. In my case, understanding a little bit more of their lives helped me with my healing as well. And doing the ugly work for me helped me with my healing. With your dad, I mean, maybe he didn't want to contact you because he knew he was declining in health and didn't want you to see him that way. I mean, you don't know what's going on in their minds and why they're making the decisions that they're making,
Yeah. Ready is a good word. Yeah. Ready and open, and timing.
Timing, I think, is absolutely everything. It just, for me, it all hit at 50, which was just a lot. I mean, it's a lot to have hit at one time, but that was obviously when it was my time to do it, and I said yes, and I embraced it, and I said, I'm willing to do the work to get to the next level, whatever that is in my healing. And so here I am, and hopefully it continues to move forward.
Cool.
Yeah. And hopefully we're helping others by having these conversations.
I hope so. That's the
goal, right? That's the end goal. Yep.
So as always, listeners, I'd encourage you. I don't know if I say this on every episode, but there's always show notes with these podcasts, and in the show notes you can find out more about the guest. You can find links to their book if they've got a book, or their website and their socials and stuff like that. Alejandra was telling me that Instagram's her thing, so we'll put a link to her Instagram. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? Something that I've not asked you about, or any random stuff?
I think the only thing I'd like to share, I touched on it earlier, because this is happening so much because of websites like Ancestry and 23andMe and all of this stuff. There are families who are finding each other, and I don't want to discourage anyone from looking. I'm not saying that. I myself did not look, but I was found by both sides. I would just encourage everyone to really take your time if this situation presents itself for you. Do not rush into meeting in person. Take your time and get to know them over the phone, through emails. Make sure when you do meet them in person, you are in a place where, you don't have, I did it all wrong. This is why I'm saying all this. That you're in a place that you can get up and walk away from if you feel overwhelmed. And understand that it may be great for a little while, but maybe not great forever. And ask the questions that you have. Don't be afraid to ask them, but just really go into it with your eyes open. I went into it with a very open heart, but my eyes were closed. And I think in the end, they have still been some of my greatest teachers. And I'm talking strictly biological mother side. Biological father side, I did it differently, having learned what I learned from the way I went into it with the mother's side. And I still have a very nice relationship with the half brothers. So sometimes you do get beautiful benefits. There's this a whole other family that I now conversate with, and my brother and I visit, and I know his kids, he knows mine, so there's a lot of beautiful positive benefits to it too. But I did everything wrong. I said yes to meeting him really quickly. I flew to where they lived. I agreed to stay at their house. So there was no, and mind you, nothing bad happened, but there was no escape, and her husband was very insistent on trying to find things that were similar. Like, I love to cook. Oh, well, she loves to cook. You love to cook. You must get that from her. It's like, well, no, my mom likes to cook too. The one that actually taught me how to cook, so there's a lot that will go on in your head if you're presented with this situation. And I cannot stress enough, take it as slow as possible. And, if you do interact with them and you decide that you don't want to meet, that's okay too. You don't have to, just because you share DNA, you don't have to. I just think there's so many cans of worms opening all over the world with this ancestry stuff, good and bad, right? I mean, I have a lot of medical knowledge that I didn't know about me before, which has been very helpful. So there's a lot of positives as well. But I never thought I'd be navigating, 2 more families and interacting with them. And then not only them, I'm not talking only birth mother, birth father, but their families, and how do their families and their kids feel about, hi, guess what? It's me. The mistake that you guys made when you were 17, so there's just so many layers to it. So if I can encourage anybody to just take it slow, if you find yourself in that situation, please do, just for your own mental health.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah,
I rushed in as well with the bio dad.
And it doesn't always work.
It didn't work at all. No.
Right.
So thank you. Yeah,
you're welcome.
Really enjoyed the
Thank
conversation.
you.
The hour's just flown by.
Is it already been an hour? Oh my goodness! Wow. Yes, has flown by.
Good on you. Thanks, Alejandra, and thank you, listeners. We'll speak to you again very soon. Take care.
Love it. Thank you so much. Bye.